being the successor to Xamarin and the next level of cross-platform development, I want to take a look at the workflow for doing a .NET MAUI app cross-platform for Android and iOS using Visual Studio 2022 for Mac. Now I like to use the Mac to do cross-platform because you have to have a Mac in order to do iOS development, whether you're doing it directly on the Mac or the Mac is in your network that you can build the iOS app from a PC. So either way, we have to have Mac. So it's just easier to do on a Mac for me, and we can easily do the Android stuff on a Mac as well. So I'm in Visual Studio 2022 for Mac. I've created a new application, or in the process of creating an application, and we have a bunch of choices here. What we want to do is create a multi-platform app. You notice you can also create just iOS. You can also create just Android. We can create cloud using Blazor, and we can create for the Mac desktop, tvOS, and so forth. So we want to create a multi-platform app, and I also have, because I've recently done that, I have a template already set up here. So once you create one multi-platform app, you're going to have a template that you can just choose. So I'm going to select that and say continue. We can target our framework of NET 7, NET 6 is another option. NET 7 is fairly new. I'm going to leave it at NET 7 for this demonstration, but NET 6 will work just as fine for us. I'm going to say continue, and we'll give it a project name. So I'm going to call mine MAUI 00 Workforce. Now the 00 is because as I create projects for this class, I want them to appear chronologically in my Finder. So I'm going to use a numbering system of 2 digits. In this case, 00, sort of our pre-class app. That's my solution name, where it's going to be located, and I'll say create. So it creates on the left-hand side our project and gives us 2 files by default that are already loaded up in the editor. One is our mainpage.xaml. That's going to be the interface. The other is our mainpage.xaml.cs. This is our C# code as code behind for our main page XAML controls. Now this is actually a working app out of the box. So I'm going to go up here on my title bar and notice I have a play button. And then over here is the device I want to run it on. I'm just going to come down here and I'm going to choose the iPhone iOS 16.2. This is an iPhone emulator. And I'm going to click play. We can see down here it's building. It's going to connect to the iOS simulator. There's the emulator opening up. It's going to show .NET, and there is my project. And in this default project, we get an image, we get a couple labels and a button. If I click this button, it says click me. I'm going to be told how many times I click that button. Now I'm going to put the emulator over here on the right-hand side. Visual Studio supports what we call hot reload. And so I'm just making some slight changes to my interface. I'm going to come over here and change maybe the font size of Hello World. Let's make it, say, 48. And as I do that, you'll notice that it changed it over here in the emulator right away. As long as you're not making wholesale changes by adding more controls or adding functions and changing your code significantly, then the emulator will work just fine. I'm going to stop the emulator. I'm going to come back to the emulator choice, and this time I'm going to come down and choose the Samsung S9 emulator that I built using the Android Device Manager. So there's my emulator. I had it running previously. Again, I'm just going to move it over here, and I'm going to run this. So it's going to build the Android version of my MAUI app. Bring the emulator back to the forefront. So you want to watch this area down here in the bottom left. It's going to give you some feedback. So it's building, and this can take a couple minutes. Now it's deploying to the device. Get my .NET splash screen, and there is my project. And I can click, and it shows how many times I clicked. So once again, I'm coming here. Let's change this font back to 32. Watch the emulator on the right-hand side. Change to 32. Notice it changes automatically. So again, I can make some minor changes to the interface and have that reflected in the live emulator. I'm going to stop both of those. And so now our workflow is going to go in and change this default code to what we want to do and to change the XAML.cs, or what we would call our code behind. The workflow process for .NET MAUI is the same as it was for Xamarin in that we're typically going to work on our interface using the XAML code, though we could code this in C# as in the code behind if we want. But we're going to use XAML to code our interface, and then we'll do the interactivity with the CS code or the code behind in that main page.xaml.cs. Later we'll add more pages. For now we're just going to work on one page and the code behind for that page. In the code for XAML, we have some header information, and then we have a scroll view which allows us to, if we had more content than would be shown on the screen, we could scroll it up and down. And inside that scroll view, we have a vertical stack layout. We're going to use a lot of stack layouts, both vertical and horizontal, to place items either on top of one another or side by side to one another. In this particular example, for our default, we have an image. That's what we see here, the little bot. Our label, Hello World. Our label, Welcome to .NET MAUI. And our button. Notice some of these we can have names as xname, x:\name equals. If you want to refer to it in code, that's what we would need to do. So I'm going to start to modify this. Actually, I'm going to get rid of the image. And when I do that, you'll see it disappears over here. I'm going to get rid of this label as well. So we'll start with our label here. We're going to change the text to just Welcome to .NET MAUI. In this case, I do want to give it a name, so I'm going to say x:\name. So we're going to change the content with our button of this label. And we're just going to call this LVL Campus. So I'm basically going to do the same workflow project that I did for Xamarin in previous videos. I'm going to delete the semantic properties for now. We'll leave the font size as 18, horizontal options as center. But let's add a couple more things here. I'm going to add a height request, and that height request is going to be 100. We can put all these different attributes on the same line if we wanted. Some people like to do multiple lines, as is done here. But we can also come here and add another one. This is going to be the width request. It's going to equal 300. And before my closing tag, I'll add a couple more. Let's change the background color. And I'm going to make it lime. And then I want the text alignment horizontally to be center. And also do a vertical text alignment of center. So you can see how that all portrays over here in the emulator. And for whatever reason, it didn't center it horizontally. And there are a few bugs occasionally that you'll find in this early version of .NET MAUI in Visual Studio 2022. I'm going to assume that's a bug, and we run it later and refresh our screen. It'll come out just fine. Next, we have a button. I'm going to change the name of this button to BTN SMCC. And we're going to change the text to SMCC. Let's get rid of the semantic properties. We'll come back and look at those later. I'm going to keep this as clean as I can. And for our clicked, we're going to say SMCC clicked. SMCC underscore clicked. Now we get a squiggly here because we haven't created that in our code behind yet. Our horizontal options are center. Let me just add a few more things here through the magic of video. So I added a width request of 150, a height request of 50, background color blue, text color white. And then I copied all that, added another button, and changed the name to BTN ASU and the text ASU and the clicked to ASU clicked. Everything else is the same. And we see those reflected over here in our Android emulator. So we need code behind for SMCC underscore clicked and ASU underscore clicked. Let's go into the code behind. So we had an on counter clicked option from before. I'm just going to delete that. And again, through the magic of video, so you have to see me type all this in. let me pause here and I'll come back. Okay, so I added my code for smcc_clicked and ASU clicked for those methods. Another little bug that I'm finding in this early version of Visual Studio for Mac is it's giving me squigglies for my control names. So LBL Compass here is saying it doesn't exist, but it actually is working because when I run this, it's going to work just fine. And I found that one of the solutions is to save your project, close it, come back, and then it seems to recognize those just fine. But we'll see here LBL Campus, I'm going to change the text to South Mountain CC. I'm going to change the background color to orange, the text color to white, and the font size to 24. When I click the ASU button, we're going to change it to Arizona State University, background color gold, text color maroon, font size 21. So I'm going to stop this since I made changes to the code and run it again. There's my project. And if I click SMCC, I get the orange background with white and the name South Mountain CC in my label, and ASU red, maroon on gold, and Arizona State University. This all seems to be functioning fine. I'm going to stop. Let's make sure it works in our Android or in our iOS emulator. SMCC and ASU. It all seems to be working. I'm going to stop. I'm going to close my, actually I'm going to save my solution. I'm going to close my solution. I'm going to reopen it. And now you notice the squigglies are gone from LBL Campus. So for whatever reason, the editor is just not updating correctly in this early version. And that is our workflow for creating a .NET MAUI project. If you just jumped into this video, you can see all the videos from the C# Xamarin Programming Cohort playlist by clicking on the image in the lower right. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos that I create, you can click my picture up in the top right and subscribe to the channel.